Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the video. 030 is coming. We have a whole load of patch notes to go through. We've got a lot of information to go through. What is this video about? It is hopefully a fairly succinct look at all the changes that are going to affect you as a player, regardless of the build that you choose in PoE 2. So let's get to it. First and foremost, let's get one thing out of the way. We're not getting a new class, unfortunately. We're not getting a new ascendancy. But what we are getting are a whole bunch of nice quality of life changes, additional content that is hopefully going to help with the ARPG power fantasy that we've all come to PoE 2 for. Alright, so first and foremost, we're getting Act 4 and interludes. Interludes being like short stories that are going to get you from the end of Act 4 to the end game. What this means is no cruel difficulty anymore. Thank you, is all I can say to GGG. I've had enough of cruel difficulty. It was driving me insane. It couldn't have come sooner enough. That's getting removed. We're getting new content in terms of Act 4, so new lore, etc., new story. We're getting interludes, which again is giving a little bit of story and context in the form of smaller stories. Yeah, overall, good thing for me. Hopefully a good thing for you as well. We're also getting a new league mechanic called Abyss. People that play PoE 1 are already going to know what this is. For PoE 2 players that haven't played PoE 1, here's a quick rundown. You are going to encounter fissures in the ground. They are going to be draining the life force of the monsters in the area. You need to clear that entire area of monsters. That's going to annoy the abyssal monsters that were feeding on those below. They're going to come up and meet you, and you're going to kill them. Once you've done that, you're going to get a abyssal trove, which is either going to give you a load of items, or it's going to take you underground, and you're going to have an additional encounter. You may get lucky and find ancient bones, which are going to be a new league mechanic in the form of a new crafting system. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to Act 2, you're going to find a new area called the Well of Souls, and you're going to be able to use that in conjunction with these ancient bones in order to affix or add affixes to your items. And the way that that's going to work is you're going to get a choice of 3 when you engage with this mechanic. A choice of 3 affixes, you'll get to choose one of those, that'll get added to your item. In campaign, you're going to get some probably very vanilla affixes, which are going to help you move through the campaign, but it's not necessarily going to be the most exciting thing. At the end, in the end game, you're going to get much more powerful mod options, and you're also going to get the ability to use these on waystones. So overall, really interesting league mechanic, much better than what we got with, say, Rogue Exiles and Wisps, which I didn't really think were much of a league mechanic at all, but, you know, I digress. This looks really exciting, can't wait to get involved in it, hope you feel the same as well. They've also then gone into the changes, so those were sort of most of the additions, or the big additions that they've got there. Now we're going to go into mostly changes that they've made to existing systems. And the first one is the support gem system that they've pretty much overhauled from the ground up. So before, you'd have uncut spirit gems and uncut support gems, right? And for the uncut support gems, you'd get tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And then you'd get certain supports that were locked behind each of these tiers. They've now overhauled that so that you now get multiple tiers of the same support gems. You could get Martial Tempo 1, Martial Tempo 2, Martial Tempo 3. And these could provide different stat values, additional stats, or perhaps just a completely different way of working on that support, which would give you the opportunity to choose on what exactly you want to do. So hopefully it gives much more variety. The additional thing that they're doing here, and this is a big one for me because a lot of the time I'll have a build that's going to require the same support gem in 2 different skills depending on what I'm doing. So that would force me to manually change the support gem to different skills as my situation changed, which is just very annoying. They're now removing that by removing the restriction of having 1 of each support gem per character. You can now have as many copies as you like. Again, whether that turns into okay, this specific support gem is good for every skill, I don't know. All I know is it's a good quality of life change for pretty much every player in the game. They've also added 11 new support gems, and they've introduced this lineage support concept. So we're getting 40 of these lineage supports, which seem to be like chase supports that you're going to find at endgame. They have added, and this is more of an honourable mention, they've added a load of new skills for different classes. Sometimes it's like 3 skills per class, sometimes it's 1. If you are a warrior main, if you are a sorceress, or a mercenary or ranger, then you would want to read this because there are some new skills coming for those particular classes. We're not going to get too involved in this. This is really for our class specific videos that are coming later on down the line. Okay, now we're getting currency. So currency changes are really big here because what we're getting are different levels or different ranks of orbs. So before you used to get Orb of Augmentation, and it would literally do the same thing every time, i.e. you'd get a random affix with a random tier applied to it, and it'd either be good for you or it'd be terrible for you, and there was really no way of controlling that. Now you get 3 different tiers. You get the normal one, you get the greater, and then you get the perfect. And each time you move up to greater or perfect, you get a minimum affix tier guaranteed. So essentially, the minimum modifier tiers will increase as you use better tiers of orbs. Big benefit here is you're going to find it easier to get the items that you want. It's still not deterministic crafting in any way, shape, or form, but at least the odds are much more in your favor than what they were in 020. Additionally, for those playing Trade League, this is probably going to benefit you in many ways, mostly in the sense that hopefully we don't go from, I don't know, 10 Exalted Orbs to a Divine to 100 Exalted Orbs to a Divine within 2 weeks. Because hopefully what's going to happen here is there's going to be a lot more nuance to the value of, say, a perfect Exalted Orb compared to a Divine. And it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. They've also added a new type of currency called Hinekora's Lock, which can be used to foresee the next currency item used on it. Seems interesting. I don't know how beneficial that's going to be. I'm not a big crafter myself, but it's really, for me, it's going to depend on how rare are these things. If they're sort of divine level rare, then probably useful for some like top tier crafts or higher tier crafts. If they're more towards you're more likely to get 10 divines in a row than you are this, then yeah, probably less useful for the majority of the player base. Anyway, moving on, they're also giving us 10 new unique items, 50 new base item types, and 20 new endgame maps, along with 15 new omens. Again, whether any of this is good or bad really depends on the nature of each of these additions. If the 10 unique items are just really great endgame unique items, I think a lot of people will be happy with that. If like half of them are basically chance or chance shards, then again, people are probably less likely to be happy about that. Same thing goes for the endgame maps. If all 20 of those are really nicely laid out maps that are a little bit smaller than the maps that we've got, then people are likely to be happy with them. If they are essentially variations of Grotto or various other sort of maps that aren't particularly popular at the moment, then yeah, people are going to groan at that. So same thing goes for the omens as well. Depends on what they are. But we're getting more choice, and that's always a good thing for me. So yeah, can't wait to see what those items are looking for. And I'm hoping, personally, we get Facebreaker as one of those uniques, but we shall see. Endgame changes that they've made are quite substantial and very, very good for players that have historically not wanted to engage with Pinnacle boss content due to the inherent cost in terms of time or currency, and risk of being able to actually get something good. So first and foremost, we are now dealing with splinters rather than stones as a currency for entering each of the difficulties of each Pinnacle boss. So when you go for Zesht T0, it's likely going to cost you, like, I think it was 100 splinters. And then as you move up, it's going to cost you more splinters as you move up the tiers. This is so that people don't feel like it's a waste of using a breach stone if they haven't engaged with it earlier on in the league, because they could just sell that for much more currency than they're likely to get in that T0, T1, T2, and even T3 version of the Pinnacle boss. So now splinters are going to scale with the difficulty. The Arbiter of Ash is an exception. So the Arbiter of Ash used to have its own Atlas passive tree. That's now changed, and now it's going to be a case that when you engage with the Arbiter of Ash, you're going to have infinite attempts to defeat the Arbiter of Ash, the non-Uber Arbiter of Ash, that is. So it's a static difficulty encounter with infinite portals. And now you're basically gonna it's gonna match the previous difficulty 4 reward. So the Arbiter of Ash being static with infinite attempts is going to allow you to engage with that content, learn the fight, hopefully beat them, ask for help if you need, but you're going to get the same level of rewards as if you were in T4 Arbiter of Ash, which was in 020. Which is hopefully going to make people much more interested in the Arbiter of Ash fight, because the rewards are going to be there from the start, and the barrier to entry of the items from the citadels are not actually going to be that bad anymore, because the Uber Arbiter of Ash that a lot of the top players, top builds are going to be going after, they use different currency. So, speaking of that, they've added an Uber version of the Arbiter of Ash boss fight, which requires the new Calamity fragments to access. These are obtained from Citadel bosses, but only once you've allocated the maximum number of points in your boss Atlas passive tree, ensuring those Citadels are all at their highest difficulty. And in sort of joined up to that, they've also changed how you actually get these Atlas passive points. So here are the ways that we now get them. So this is great for me just overall, because now we're not looking for the +1 level to monster levels, which was kind of a pain to find anyway. It's a much more deterministic approach, and progression seems a lot smoother here. You're gonna have to fight the initial Arbiter of Ash boss in order to get the latest or full 10 points in here, and then you'll be able to go for the Uber Arbiter of Ash if you feel that you're ready. Now, one thing that's not clear to me in some of these changes is, what does this mean? Are they removing Olroth, or are they just moving him elsewhere? And if they are moving him elsewhere, where is he going? We're getting anomalies that can appear on the Atlas skill tree, on the Atlas itself. This should be a nice new little bit of content. I'm interested to see what this actually turns into. They've also massively changed how waystones are going to work, and I think this is a good thing, but it might not appear that way at first. In 020, it was often good if you could get as many prefixes on the map as possible and not as many suffixes, because the suffixes increased difficulty, the prefixes increased rewards. This kicked off a debate where people were like, well, it's not really a risk versus reward game at that point. It's either all reward and how do you avoid the risks. What they've done here is they've said, right, what we're going to do now is every time you get a modifier, that's going to have a bonus and a downside. So the risk is going to increase and the reward is going to increase as you add affixes to a waystone. I don't know what this is necessarily going to do for things like the necessity for towers, as an example, but I imagine we're still going to need to juice in the same way that we're doing. It's just now waystones are going to have downsides for every upside. Linked to that, they've now said that you can no longer get anything more than 8 modifiers when your waystone is corrupted. This is probably because they're aware that if they don't put a ceiling on the difficulty, then the builds that are actually able to get all the way up to say 10 modifiers or whatever on a corrupted map are going to get the better rewards, and people are going to obviously gravitate towards those more powerful builds. Whereas if they have a difficulty ceiling on maps, more builds are going to be able to contend with that, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, and it's a good thing so that people don't feel pushed into doing a build that they're ultimately not interested in, but they feel that they need to do it so that they can compete with other players in Trade League. All right, some couple of really interesting things here. So items found in very high level areas now have a random quality, or they'll have a random quality. So they can now get up to 30% quality. So before you could get like superior items and they'd have a random 8 to 20 or sorry 1 to 20% quality. Now they can get up to 30% quality. But you cannot get 30% quality with currency. So you have to get it from these drops. Likewise, items now can have a maximum of 3 sockets where it used to be 2 sockets. But you can only get that from the drops. So sometimes you would get drops that would already have sockets in them. You now have a very small chance of getting a 3 socket item instead of a 2 socket item, and a 2 socket item instead of a 1 socket item. When you combine that, you could potentially get a base item with 30% quality and one more socket than what is currently possible to get without corrupting. So then when you corrupt it, you might even be able to get a 4 socket item, which previously would have been up to a 3 socket item, plus 30% quality. These are going to be very, very rare drops and very, very expensive. So if you do ever find something that has 3 sockets non-corrupted or 2 sockets non-corrupted or more than 20% quality, just bear in mind that those could be very valuable things and you should check the prices of them before doing anything with it. They've also changed the Abyss map by renaming it to Marrow, which like works for me because obviously they're going to have an Abyss area for the Abyssal League mechanic. So I can't wait to see what that new Abyss area looks like. All right, so what we've got here now is the basics for a little bit more of a deterministic set of crafts slash the ability to make much, much better items with a bit of luck. Following on from that and continuing with that kind of notion, they've done an essence rework. So before essences used to be able to target specific tags of affixes, now an essence is going to apply a guaranteed affix to a item. So a couple of changes that they've made. So now we're going to get 4 tiers of essences: lesser, normal, greater, and perfect. And instead of adding a modifier of a certain tag, essences now add a specific modifier depending on the tier of essence and type of item it is being applied to. They've also added 7 new types of essences, and Essence of Hysteria now augments different guaranteed modifiers based on the type of item it is applied to. So this feels very much like more of the PoE 1 style essences rather than what we had in PoE 2. So again, this is another like push towards a more deterministic crafting methodology. So this is the first time that we're actually getting something that is going to be a deterministic craft aside from runes. Now, when we actually look at these changes as well, so the idea of being able to get 3 socket instead of 2 and 2 socket instead of 1, that coupled with the essences is going to give you a much more likely chance of being able to work out different issues with your build by changing your items as and when you need to. So if you need more fire resistance, you might have more sockets available now. If you need more fire resistance, you might be able to use an essence on a base to guarantee that, as an example. So again, hopefully the curved being able to get your build turned on is going to be much smoother than it currently is. And maybe you don't even need to worry about too much of trade. Maybe you don't need to engage too much in trade anymore. We shall have to see. Anyway, other general improvements. Omens can now stack with a maximum stack size of 10. Great quality of life improvement. Having to manually put each omen into my inventory every time I want to do a craft with omens is just really, really annoying. They've also made it so that skill support and reservation gems can now be traded through the currency exchange, which is great because that's going to hopefully encourage people to be a little bit more curious. Whereas before it was just a real pain in the backside to gather all of these things up, either through trade with players or farming it yourself. So a little bit less friction when it comes to skill support and reservation gems right there. Player changes. You now have the sprint mechanic, which is going to be an interesting one. This is going to help you speed up, allow you to backtrack through maps, allow you to pass through the campaign areas quicker. It does have the downside that if you get hit, you will fall over, and if you are being chased by a lot of enemies, you're probably going to die. It's not clear whether things like defenses still apply while you're in sprint. If it does, it'll be interesting to see how this changes things like racing and speed running, because maybe evasion starts becoming a really, really important stat for things like sprinting at that point. Be interesting to see how that all works out. They've made a change to fire damage as well. So in terms of ignite, it used to be kind of like luck of the draw. You'd hit something, the higher the hit, generally you'd get more of a chance to ignite, it seemed. But now you're getting this thing called flammability, and the higher flammability that you have, the more chance you have of igniting. So it brings it in line with chill and shock. So additionally, with shock and chill, you now have an 8-second time that those things are going to be applied, because the GGG want these things to be a much more rewarding mechanics. They think that increasing the duration is going to make this better. It's unclear whether ignite is now going to be something that's going to be inherently useful to people, more so than it was in 020, or whether shock is necessarily going to still be king of the hill. We don't really know yet. We'll have to wait and see how all of this interacts with other changes that they've made, like support gems, passive skill tree, etc., etc. Unarmed attacks now have a base critical hit chance of 5%, which was previously 0. This is to account for a hollow palm technique. We're going to be going into that in a separate video, because that is a really interesting thing to look at. But yeah, looks like unarmed attacks are now going to have 5% base critical hit chance. Alright. They've also changed the way crossbow reloading and switching crossbow ammunition works. It used to slow you down when you did this. It's not going to do that anymore. Blocking is no longer limited to strikes and projectiles by default. All hits are now specifically unblockable. Are not specifically unblockable, sorry, with the red flash being the only thing that can be that can't be blocked. So yeah, let's redo that a bit, because I think I got that a bit wrong here. So everything is now blockable apart from hits that have a red flash on them, which will mean that they're specifically unblockable. They've also, though, lowered the blocking or the max block chance to 50%. And a lot of people have kind of like commented on this. They think that it's going to be a massive nerf. They think blocking has actually been nerfed. It's actually not. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the chance that things that are hitting you are, not hits, not strikes, not projectiles, then actually this is actually a really big defensive buff. So yeah, I think this is a good thing for block. It's basically taking the Warbringer Ascendancy and just applying it to near enough everyone and then some. So it's not surprising that 50% max block chance is the new normal rather than 75, because otherwise it would literally be insane. Moving on from that though, swapping weapons being instant now. Hopefully people are going to get a little bit more creative with weapon swap. We'll have to see, but that's a nice big change and a welcome change as it is. I think what this probably ends up doing is increasing the benefit to things like Leap Slam and Shield Bash, because actually Shield Bash doesn't have a cooldown anymore. Now, that might be a really good way of getting through maps. I'm going to guess that that will be the ideal thing for things like speedrunning, because at least you're not risking that death by getting hit over. But we'll have to see. Even so, having weapon swap be instant now means that you can go from attacking with your chosen weapon to a travel skill instantly. So there are a lot of those are one of the potential benefits, but I'm sure there are a lot of other benefits there in terms of build diversity as well. We're not going to go into the ascendancy changes. It's really just a shout out to yourself to say most ascendancies have had some changes made to them, if not all of them. and some of them are smallish, and some of them are fundamentally massive changes to the ascendancy. And yeah, when you pick a league start, please look at these changes, or look at one of my videos that goes into each of these ascendancies in each of the classes. All right, passive skill changes, again, honorable mention here. It's just to say that there have been some pretty significant changes to some really well-known keystones like Resolute Technique, but also just to say that there are many, many, many new clusters being added to the passive skill tree. So a lot of people have been talking about attribute changes and how that things like Giant's Blood is a massive nerf to Warrior and things like that. But actually we might find that with these passive skill changes, you're going to find that there's a lot more power in the passive trees than there were before, and that's going to offset any like nerfs that you're seeing currently in these patch notes. But again, we'll have to see. Have to wait and see. There's a load of stuff here around skill changes. Too much to go into for a video, especially when we're looking at generic changes for all players, but these will be looked at in future videos. Unique item changes. A lot of unique item changes. Only one I've highlighted just because Tangle Tongue was a unique that pretty much everyone took notice of, either because they wanted to use it or because they thought they might be able to sell it. But the change that's being made here is likely to mean that, on the whole, Lightning Spear is not going to be as even close to as powerful. It might even just be Giga nerfed to this point. We don't know. So this is to say that Tangle Tongue is now not the be-all and end-all of spears for the vast majority of builds. You know, the big one being Lightning Spear. It is now brought in line. Pretty much Giga nerf, to be honest. It was 10 to 20, it's now 5 to 8 in what you can get. So, yeah, we'll have to see what the future is for this, but historically, GGG have always been a little bit too generous with the nerf hammer when it comes to overperforming builds, and this is an example of that, in my opinion. Anyway, loads of item changes as well. We won't go through those right now. Monster changes. Lowered the growth of monster evasion rating with level, which results in around about 30% less evasion rating than before at level 80. This is going to help pretty much every class that doesn't hard focus on accuracy. So Amazon probably going to have less of a thing here, but other classes are going to benefit from this greatly. This is also not directly, but also indirectly a thing with Warrior. So Warrior will now be guaranteed to hit things that they're close to. So if you are doing a melee build, that's going to be a benefit for you with Warrior. Something around Sekimers quickly. Hourglass trial. So the Zarok fight with the Hourglass section of that fight. It used to be that if you missed one of the hourglasses, you would just fail the whole trial. That's now not happening. You're going to get you're going to be punished for it, but not as severely. This is a great change just because the Zarok fight sometimes would result in a hourglass being spawned at two very opposite sides of the fight, which would make it very difficult for you to get, especially if you were a slower class like Warrior. So this should hopefully encourage more people to get in there and fight Zarok and get their ascendancy points without buying them. We shall have to see on whether that actually pans out that way or not. Non-unique items on Rogue Exiles now have an effect. They're now affected by the increase of rarity of items found in area. I hope this increases the risk versus reward for Rogue Exiles. Like, during the campaign, they're somewhat useful because you can get things like jewelry, but in the end game, I found them to be just a non-issue. I even tried speccing into it in the skill tree, and it didn't really work out very well. So, yeah, hopefully this is just gonna be a buff to them in terms of risk and reward. But again, we'll have to wait and see. Loads of other changes here, so loads of microtransactions being enabled from PoE 1 into PoE 2, loads of bug fixes as well. That's really it, though. That's everything that you need to know as a player regardless of what you're picking, those are the things that you really do need to know. Now, whether or not this turns into a really great league or not, it's just kind of unknown right now because we don't have certain information that we would very much like to have. But I personally am looking forward to it. I know that I said that in 020 as well, and it didn't quite work out that way. But I really think that the developers this time have tried to make it so that we get a really good experience here. If you're looking at Reddit and you're looking at other areas and you're seeing people go, oh, this is nerf, this is nerf, this is going to be terrible, this class is going to be awful. Just, if you're interested in, like, Warrior, if you're interested in Mercenary, just give it a go. Because I don't think anyone really knows what all of this means. There are so many changes here, it's going to be very difficult for someone to come out and objectively say, this is a nerf, or this is a buff. And that comes in the form of, say, the blocking. Blocking was... people were going, oh no, 25% reduction, that's a massive nerf. But when you really think about it, it's actually a buff. So, yeah, let's wait and see how it goes. I've got faith that this is going to be a great league. I hope to see you in 030. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it. Have a good one. Take it easy.